Flacco Show. Da-da-da, da-da-da. On ESPN Radio.
After the hour, great to have you with us, ESPN Radio, ESPNHawaii.com. Coming up in about 15 minutes, I don't understand the strategy of the Manti Te'o camp. We will talk a little bit about that today. I do not understand what they are thinking with a second interview. That coming up 15 minutes from now here on the program. As we get ready for the Super Bowl coming up in a couple of weeks, Matthew Miselis joins us now from Bleacher Report, covers the NFL, specifically spends a lot of time covering the Baltimore Ravens. And, Matt, what's really intriguing is we get a quarterback that we will end up talking about for the next 2 weeks. And some people will continue to ask the question, is he an elite quarterback? A lot of people will ask that question, but some of these numbers, more playoff wins since 2008 than any other quarterback in the game. 6 road playoff wins, more than Joe Montana, Terry Bradshaw, Steve Young, Troy Aikman, Brett Favre, Tom Brady, and Peyton Manning. It appears that a lot of us have been wrong on Joe Flacco for quite some time. Is that the case?
Yeah, Josh. First off, thank you for having me again on the show. Greatly appreciate it. And I agree. He certainly proved me wrong. I had my doubts later on in the year. But, the big thing is how pieces fell into place. Clearly, Jim Caldwell being promoted as the offensive coordinator around in late December really shifted gears. Flacco really began taking more control of the offense, being able to audible out of certain plays. And he showed his ability to be able to take control and to, identify what the defense is showing him and taking advantage. And, the question of being an elite quarterback, certainly he's proving that he is on the brink of being in that conversation. You beat Tom Brady and Peyton Manning on the road in back-to-back weeks. That's pretty damn impressive.
You talked about Jim Caldwell. I think that's a really important place to go here because Jim Caldwell, in one of the weirdest moves for a winning team that we've seen in quite some time, Caldwell takes over the play-calling duties. And what have you noticed with Jim Caldwell that you think has helped change this offense, and not just when it comes to with Flacco, but the rest of this offense? What have you noticed with Caldwell?
Well, I think what I've noticed so far that's really pinned, and we kind of saw it in the second half of yesterday's game, was spreading out the football more, not only getting the ball to Torrey Smith, but also using Anquan Bolden, Dennis Pitt in the middle of the field. It was very strange that Cam Cameron never really focused on the middle of the field where he had, the weaponry to use that. Bolden, was always known for his strengths back in Arizona as being a guy who can take advantage in the middle of the field, and same goes with Pitt. And also, just using the 3 wide receiver sets. In today's version of the NFL, it becomes very predictable when you have the 2 wide receiver sets with the 1 tight end and the fullback with Ray Rice running right behind Flacco. So Caldwell didn't change much of the game plan specifically. He didn't want to completely turn over the entire offensive game plan, but just to be more aggressive at times, show different angles that defenses weren't used to, and giving Flacco more of that control. And certainly, so far, it has paid off.
Let's talk a little bit about what Flacco, that offense was going into, because a lot of people were talking about the heavy winds, supposed to knock down Flacco's deep ball. And it seemed early that Flacco's deep ball did not look very solid as those winds were continuing to pound down and make that ball inaccurate. But it seemed like as he got better, he didn't throw for a great amount, but he made the completions underneath, especially that it took for them to move the chains. And it seemed like it wasn't really the deep ball that had to be the key in that game.
I agree. And I think a big thing that goes unnoticed is his protection, how much it has vastly improved late in the year. In Week 17, Coach Harbaugh decided to go with Bryant McKinney at left tackle. He was the left tackle for the 2011 season, lost the job in training camp and was battled by injuries, so he never got to take that job moving forward. But then left guard Ja Reed eventually was Assembly to left guard, and they moved Michael Orr to the right tackle, where he is clearly a much better pass protector and also run blocker. And, with completing on those short routes and, those intermediate routes, Flacco had the time to look all over all the field. They had all the different directions, keeping the Patriots defense on their heels, and his ability to just be patient, not to force any passes like he typically has done in the past, it has really proved to be big time for him.
How much do you think the injury to Aqib Talib hurt for New England and helped Baltimore?
Oh, I certainly think it was a big factor because you saw all early on, especially in these playoffs, Torrey Smith might have been the biggest name receiver, when looking at the Ravens offense, but Anquan Bolden clearly, had an impact. He's always been there for Flacco, and Flacco, made it known that he wanted to go to him early. And, the Patriots, what they showed that different kind of look. Instead of putting Talib, who's a bigger, more athletic corner on Torrey Smith, they put him against Anquan Bolden. And early on, it looked like a clear advantage in favor of the Patriots. But then once he went down with that hamstring injury, could never end up returning to the game. It ultimately set up things for the Ravens. So when in the second half, they were ready to make adjustments, they were ready to see what exactly wasn't working in the first half, and that's why they decided to spread it out more against the Patriots secondary. I wasn't really that impressed with outside of Talib. Talib did play very well after coming in the trade from Tampa Bay, so that was a very huge part. Losing him, it really set up everything that this Ravens offense wanted.
Let's talk defense here. Matt Miselis joining us. Bleacher Report covers the National Football League and has his pulse on the Baltimore Ravens as they get ready for the Super Bowl coming up in less than 2 weeks. And New England wanted to run that quick offense, that no huddle. They try to get a play off every 24 seconds. And there was a play that jumps into my mind that I think really summarized where Baltimore really showed me something in this game. And I think it was a 3rd and short. I want to say this was in the second quarter. I could be wrong. But they had a key stop, led to a no gain, forced New England. I think they had to punt it away from 53 yards out instead of go for a field goal. I've got to believe it was the second quarter, but for a defense that is older, is not 100%, and has taken its knocks, I thought that play in itself was really key for the Baltimore Ravens and how they had game planned and how they had come prepared for what New England was going to be able to do. How did you see the Baltimore defense shaking out?
Well, building off on how they stopped really on that 3rd and short, it just shows how much they vastly improved in their run defense. You got to remember early on in the season how poor they were against not only elite running backs, but some, quality running backs in the NFL. It was clearly they were near the bottom of the league in the rushing defense. But what happened was the Patriots, they certainly did show their ability of wanting to try that no-huddle offense. But facing Andrew Luck and Peyton Manning the previous 2 weeks, those who like to run no-huddle offense, it gets them in gear. And they were standing around waiting for Tom Brady to make his move. They weren't trying to outsmart Brady. They were showing him what he was going to give him. And Brady didn't really have much of an answer for it. They were, the big thing is, imposing their will and showing their physicality and out-muscling the Patriots offensive line. And they clearly proved that, yesterday with Haloti Ngata, Donnell Ellerbe, and the linebacker made a lot of big-time plays in the backfield, one of the more underrated players on that defense. And, at the time, you just keep building momentum. Clearly having Ray Lewis back, putting everybody in their proper place always helps, but they were running such an emotional run, and really nothing could stop them after going through those 2 weeks, after being prepared, having seen Brady so many times. They were ready for anything that he brought at them.
John Harbaugh is going to be coaching against his brother coming up in 2 Sundays from now in the Super Bowl, in what is a great moment because it's one of those storylines that we're not used to seeing. You followed John Harbaugh since he took the job at Baltimore. Give me your impression of what's improved with John the most as he's went from rookie to several years ago, a rookie head coach to now a coach who's going to be looking for his first Super Bowl win.
I think the biggest thing, because him and his brother are so alike in so many ways of how they play their styles. But I think we saw later on in this season, especially game in my quarterback's hands. This is now a quarterback-driven league where the quarterback has to ultimately be the leader, be the enforcer of the team getting to the next level. And a big reason why he let Cam Cameron go later in the season was because, him and Flacco weren't exactly seeing eye to eye. Flacco didn't have really much control of the offense. It was Cam Cameron calling all of the direct plays, and Flacco had to stick with him. But once he got that more power, once Harbaugh gave him that authority to run that offense, it just showed the confidence he kind of had. And I remember I was reading a quote early on in the week, and Flacco, not normally the most confident guy in the sense that he's not really usually outspoken, but he said, he felt that nobody could beat us. And, for him to show that kind of confidence really goes on the way how horrible it is. He kept, a lot of the key things intact with the defense, with its physicality, with its toughness. He didn't want to change that when he came into this environment. But after, experiencing those tough losses last year and a few against the Pittsburgh Steelers in the past, he ultimately knew Joe Flacco was ready to take the next step, and they had the talent around him, and so far, it paid off.
Matt Miselis, Bleacher Report, covered the National Football League and set his pulse to the Baltimore Ravens. Matt, enjoy the Super Bowl in a couple weeks. Many thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. Enjoy Super Sunday.
Will do, Matt. Matt joins us here on ESPN Radio and ESPNHawaii.com. By the way, Jeremy Schaap.